From New Hampshire Public Radio, I'm Laura Canoy, and this is The Exchange live from home. Tonight's show is the third in our special summer series of virtual events examining the impact of COVID-19 on New Hampshire and where our state goes from here. Today, with all the uncertainty about heading back to school, we're talking about how your family hopes to navigate the new academic year. What did you learn from the end of school last year? What were your family triumphs and struggles? And how are you approaching the new school year together? Now, we're not focusing on different models that schools are adopting. We've done that in previous shows. Rather, we'd like to hear how families are thinking about whatever model they have to contend with, and more broadly, how family dynamics are evolving as this pandemic continues. Our guests today are Jessica Leahy, a teacher and writer. She writes about parenting and education for a wide variety of publications. Her book is called The Gift of Failure. Also with us, Tim Leahy. He's an epidemiologist at the University of Vermont Medical Center and Jess's husband. They've been writing together about back to school from a teaching, parenting, and health perspective. And also with us, KJ Dell'Antonia. She's a writer, the former editor of the New York Times Motherlode blog, and author of the book How to Be a Happier Parent. Her new novel is called The Chicken Sisters. Welcome to all of you. Jess, let's start with you. For a lot of parents, Jess, as you know, especially those who are working, who may have multiple children, they may have limited internet access or all of the above, what's one thought you'd like to share with parents to keep in mind, Jess, as far as their kids' struggles, their successes, and their happiness this year, no matter what their school situation?
You know, a lot of the kids' discontent and unhappiness and depression right now is coming from just this incredible feeling of lack of control. There's so little that kids control in general. And then in this situation where they're stuck at home and they can't see their friends and they can't even control, their activities throughout the day with their friends, it's just really frustrating for them. One of the things that we can really help them with is by giving them back a little bit of control, maybe over helping with dinner, making decisions throughout the day. Instead of saying, what do you want to do? Give them one or two choices. Would you like to play this game or that game? And it can just sort of help them feel like they have a little bit more control over their environment. It's really hard for them and discombobulating for them to have so little control over anything right now.
That sounds like advice for littler kids. Do you want this game or
hmm
that game? What do you want for dinner? What
hmm
about the older kids, Jess? It's been hard for teens and young adults.
Yeah, I think what we don't tend to do very often is to ask the kids how they would like things to work. If, you know, we're so close right now, everyone's in the house together, kind of on top of each other, and we're a little sick of each other. And maybe the vision that I, as a mother, have for how we're supposed to sit down at the table with the napkins and all the utensils just so, maybe that's not what they want right now. And so instead of just assuming everything should go always the way I want, I like to turn to my kids sometimes and say, what would your perfect dinner look like? Or what would your perfect family movie night look like? Or what would you like to do this evening? And giving some of those, just the indication even that you're listening can be enough to really help a kid feel like they're a part of the family and not just some, hanger-oner that doesn't have any say in the way things go. So again, it's just a little bit of choice, a little bit of feeling like they're involved and have a stake in the decisions we make as a family can help a lot.
Well, KJ, what's the mantra that you're keeping in mind? You have 4 children as this academic year approaches.
Um, I've got two, and one is if you see something, don't always say something, and that's kind of a really nitty gritty one. We are all in here together, right? We're all super close. We have every opportunity to observe everything that our kids are doing wrong. And there's plenty of it, from the endless series of seltzer cans left all over the place to, the socks in the middle of whatever. I try not to point them all out. My kids might tell you that I actually am still pointing them all out, but I assure you that I am not.
There's a lot more
And
than what you're pointing out. Yeah,
now
go
that
ahead.
I've owned this on the radio, I'm gonna, work even harder to. You gotta let some of it go, because under normal circumstances, we would not, have quite so much opportunity when we're on top of each other to, say, close that cabinet, don't stand there with the refrigerator open, the nagging. So that's one. And the other one is I've been trying to pay attention to soaking up the good. There are really terrible things about this time, and our family has had a rough go of it in many ways. But there have also been some, you know, the fact that we're spending so much time together has its nice sides, and I try to pay attention to those.
A few months ago, KJ, you wrote an article where you urged parents not to stress too much about lessons and grades in these times. This was kind of in the middle of the spring remote learning that we were
Yeah.
all in. And you said, our kids are learning more important lessons than academics this spring. So, what were you trying to get at, KJ?
Well, especially when all of this hit so suddenly and so ferociously. We all had the rugs yanked right out from underneath us. Lots of kids were watching sports championships just, not happening. School no longer, everything, everything. And I just really felt like at that moment, everybody was learning to make larger sacrifices for the greater good, whether they were 5 or 15 or 19. And we are still there, but we've definitely kind of lost sight of that right now. I think it's not feeling as much. It's hard to maintain that kind of urgency for so long, but we're still there. The need to work together, the discussions about how we're going to protect each other, those are huge and important. So the academics is probably still going to be it's still going to be hinky this year. It just is. And it's important to think about, we've got a great opportunity with our older kids to let them take some control over their academics, to make some decisions about how they want to handle it, what they want to do and when. And if they're old enough to do that, they absolutely should. And if they're little enough that you're really having to turn the Zoom off and on, I think they can probably take a break. It'll work out. It'll work out. Academically. I'm not saying anything about how hard it is to have them sitting there all the time.
Yeah, and that's sort of the two themes that we're discussing this hour. One is how families are facing this academic year, and the other is, as you just said, KJ, how people are feeling about continuing to be home. Some parents are out working. Some parents are working from home. And even the parents who are out working outside of the house, people don't have events, parties, meetings, things like that. So everybody's more at home together for sure. Jess, what's your take on that? How much should parents and kids really stress about the academics at this point?
And that I'm so glad you asked about that, because one of the things that a lot of teachers, especially teachers of younger kids, are talking about is maybe this is an opportunity to focus heavily, more so maybe even, on the social emotional learning. We have this opportunity right now where we're with our kids more often. It's going to be really hard to stay on top of everything academically, and that's okay, because especially for younger kids, they're in a window where learning about empathy and perspective taking is so important. And so one of the best things I heard recently is this opportunity to help kids see what this might be like from other people's perspective. That if we could talk to our kids and say, the reason I can't, let's say your kid is in one of those situations where they can go to school some of the time, and your kid has the sniffles, but they're really sad because you're going to keep them home. You can have a really great conversation with them about, well, you have this classmate, and that classmate's mom is a little bit medically fragile. She's not really well. And so can you imagine what that would be like for your classmate if his mom got sick because you had the sniffles? So if it were me, and I have older kids, but if I had littler kids right now, my focus would be so much on making up for the fact that they're not getting as much of the social emotional learning as they would playing with friends, having time to sort of, have little arguments with friends and work them out. They're just not getting that. And this is a period of time where that learning is critical. Kindergarten teachers especially talk about the fact that social emotional learning and understanding social cues is way more important than the academics, the real academic stuff they learn in kindergarten. So let's spend some time focusing on that stuff rather than worrying about, their ability to add 4 and 4.
Well, so Tim, let's bring you in as an infectious disease physician. What questions do you think parents should be asking themselves and asking their schools so that kids can go back to school safely?
I think the big question to ask is since we are the curriculum as parents, what are we going to teach them this year? And I think it's important to grapple with the fact that the way we face uncertainty, the way we help our neighbors, the people who we trust in the public sphere, do we trust science or do we give in to baseless politics? I think these kinds of lessons are the kinds of things that our kids will remember decades from now. Did mom and dad feel strong and purposeful and resolute in the face of uncertainty, or did we complain a lot? I think they will take these things to heart.
What about a checklist, Tim, or just things for parents to think about as they make this decision about sending their kid back to school? Now, let's just say some districts here in New Hampshire are going all remote, but there's a lot of hybrid and there's a fair number of all in person. That's the plan now. It could change, but go ahead, Tim.
So I think lots of parents are feeling like it's just out of control and the decision is too big to even make. So it can be incredibly helpful to boil it down into just a few different specific things you have to think about. So I think probably the most important one is how's the local epidemiology looking? If you're in a state like New Hampshire where things are settling down and not fantastic, but also not out of control in the way that Florida, Arizona, and Georgia are, then I think it's reasonable to think about going back to school. Then you can ask your question about the safety of the kid. Does your child have a special medical issue that might make her more vulnerable than the average person to the dangers of COVID-19? Or is she healthy and so it's safer for her to go back to school? Same thing with your household. I think the other sort of gut level thing you want to think about is where is your child in terms of their emotional development? I think for some kids, being with their classmates, interacting in person can be incredibly important, as Jess talked about. Whereas I think other kids, a year of cave time would not be the worst thing that happened to them, and that's
Cave
okay.
time. Go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
So I'm just as a physician, I'm prescribing cave time for some proportion of the population. I think the other thing you want to think about is whether you have the ability as a household to have some other option than to send your kid into school full time or in some hybrid program. And I think we have to be honest that some households have options and some, because they are essential workers or single parents or for whatever reason, really don't have that option. And I think we need to accept that and feel like, hey, if you have options, great, leverage it. It's going to help you and other people. And if you don't, that's fine too. We can work out the safety plan in the school when you come.
So, Tim, Jess alluded to this earlier, but I'd like your thoughts too, especially given your background as an epidemiologist. What are the benefits of being in school, even given the threat of the virus?
This is a neglected piece of this conversation. I think we focus on the risks of sending our kids to school, and of course we should think about that stuff. But it is equally clear that it is incredibly important for our children to go to school. For different kids, it might be emergently important versus just kind of generally important in a way that one year might not matter to. But it's important to children's emotional well-being, as Jess said, their social development, to be able to interact. And learn the rules of social interaction. You could argue that's more important than whatever lesson they're going to learn in that week. It's also intellectually important to kids to be there in person. Online education can be fantastic, but I think in-person education is superior to half-baked online education. And so if possible, we want our kids to have that kind of education. We also know that even outside of the learning that kids do, many kids come to school as a refuge, that school is a place where they can have an adult they trust. It's a place where mandatory reporters can help keep them safe. It's a place where they can get a free lunch. And these are all incredibly important, life-altering, good sides to going back to school that we don't want to discount when we think about the risks.
Well, for our live audience with us, let us know. How are you adapting to the new school year? How have you changed your plans? And what drove those decisions? We'd love to hear from you. Lots of conversation going on right now on the chat, and I want to share some with you. In the chat, we did have a live audience member who wants your advice on how to prepare teens for a restrictive and thoroughly different school environment, since teens are looking forward to the social part of school, which will be largely absent. And also, how can we help our kids be comfortable going back to school, but be aware of being safe without stressing them out further? Those are great questions. And KJ, how about you? You've got more than one teenager. How do you prepare your teens for going back? And it's not going to be, as fun and social as it was last year.
I think one of my teens is sitting here with me.
Great.
So, yeah. So when we have been talking about preparing for this year, we've really been focused on how, sort of anything can happen. It's going to be unexpected. You're going to be asked to really step up and be flexible. We hope that there will be sports, but we don't have any way of knowing. And I guess I don't exactly know that we've done anything super special other than just to have this very open family conversation constantly about what's happening and what other places are doing and, how long it's going to go on and what's we talk about it sort of all the time and endlessly. And I know that the kids talk about it with their friends as well. So I don't know that we've done anything special other than to try to be super open about it.
Sure. And nobody really knows, as we keep saying. So let's bring your son in, Wyatt, going into ninth grade. Wyatt, thanks for being with us. Thanks for coming to the microphone.
Yeah, no problem.
So how are you feeling about that question that one of our audience members asked? School is not going to be as social as it once was. You guys got to wear masks. You're not supposed to be too close together. What are you thinking around that, Wyatt?
I think a lot of kids are really going to struggle with the not as social aspect of school because, just remembering from last year, one of the main parts of school, people are really just with each other, and especially in the classroom, if you're in a group project with your friends eating lunch. I think people are going to have a really hard time staying, especially the 6 feet apart part of things. Also, knowing I've been playing soccer recently, our town has a low number of cases. We're able to do this. And people are supposed to be wearing masks the whole time, but sometimes kids forget. Sometimes kids are not wearing them. I don't think that a lot of kids understand the importance of, especially with the wearing masks part of things. So I think that it's going to be hard to have everybody wearing masks at once. I think people are going to struggle with that a lot.
Wow. So what do you want parents to know? Wyatt, this is your chance to not only let your mom know, but all the people listening. What do you want parents to sort of know and understand what this is like for you?
Well, I know with a lot of schools, they're going back to at least 50% online for all the kids. And one of the things with online school is with normal school, especially going into a new grade, you're learning new things that the teacher's been doing for forever. But with online school, even the teachers haven't been doing it for any longer than you have. So sometimes something might happen, a mistake might be made. It's not always your kid's fault. You don't have to instantly blame them. You can maybe just look at it for a little bit, and maybe talk to your kid about it instead of instantly just seeing it as their fault. An example of that might be if your kid hasn't gotten all their work in on time, it might be some technical issues more than just them not doing everything.
Yeah, not understanding maybe. Yeah, go ahead, Wyatt.
Another important thing I think parents should know, especially doing now these times when kids aren't really allowed to they're not allowed to go see all of their friends. They're usually especially limited to a very short number to keep in a bubble. I know my parents don't do this, but I know with some of my friends, their parents will take away their phone if they do something wrong or if they just have been on it too much in the day. But that's like their main way of communicating with their friends right now, especially later in the night. I know some kids have like a device curfew, and that's fine if you're keeping that, but just think about during these times, they might want to just FaceTime one of their friends that they haven't been with for a while.
It's the only connection you have, really. Yeah. What about teachers, Wyatt? Again, what's your message to teachers as everybody embarks on this sort of round 2 that everybody hopes will be better, but still, it's an experiment?
Something I don't really know what the teachers have been preparing for recently over the summer. But I know something that can happen a lot of times is by mistake, but a teacher might compare a student to a separate student. But especially with this new online thing we have going on, a lot of the kids are going to take it very differently. So if the teachers are like, how come you're not able to do this? Everybody else is doing it just fine. That kid might be facing completely separate issues, especially with the whole fact that one kid might, especially if they're coming from a less wealthy family, might not have as good internet. They might not be able to see the videos and stuff that they're putting out as well. Might have trouble connecting to Skype calls. Parents, the teachers should really make sure that they're being really understanding with that whole part of things, because it's not just new for them, and the kids get that it can be stressful, but that goes both ways. It's not just for the teachers.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on in people's houses that the teachers might not be aware of. Wyatt, I'm so happy you came to talk to us today. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
No problem.
Good luck in the school year.
Thank you.
Lots of commentary on the chat, and a 9-year-old watching live has one word for her thought on the upcoming school year in all capital letters: awful. Thanks to her. Jessica, what does that make you think? Awful.
This has been all summer long. I've been talking with a lot of parenting educators and educators themselves about, just the struggle. Teachers have been struggling to try to get. Wyatt said that, he doesn't know what teachers have been preparing for. Well, everyone's been in that same boat. Teachers didn't know what they were preparing for until just recently. In fact, there's some teachers right now who are still being asked to prepare for both for in-person and virtual and possibly hybrid. I think it's really important also to remember that online learning or remote learning or distance learning, all of whatever it is you want to call it, there are nuances. This is a skill that people train for. And most teachers, nearly all teachers, none of them, hardly any of them have had any specific training in online teaching and teaching, via this platform. And so it's not like, okay, well, now they've had a summer, I'm sure they've got it all figured out now. That is not at all the case. They're doing the best they can with the tools they've been given. Many teachers are purchasing their own webcams, purchasing their own supplies. It's a really difficult situation right now. Some teachers are having to do it from home. Some are being asked to report to school. And some of those teachers have their own children that they're having to deal with as well. So how they're juggling all of it right now, I have no idea how that's going to work for them. But I think this is a really great opportunity to remember that and to say, okay, let's cut the kids some slack. Let's cut the teachers some slack. Let's cut the administration some slack, and let's cut the parents some slack. I think this is going to be a huge moment for understanding this from other people's perspective. And I would love to circle back around to the fact that this is an incredible opportunity for us to be discussing that with the kids, to say, look, I know this is really frustrating, but can you imagine what it must be like to love being a teacher because you love being